Metal Gear Solid 2 sold really well and was critically adored at the time, and with a lot of questions left unanswered at the end, you would think that Kojima would carry on the story of Snake and Raiden. Well no, Metal Gear Solid 3 was set to be a prequel to the entire series, touching on the origins of the Patriots and giving us a chance to play as Big Boss himself. Which was an exciting prospect. Seeing his origins made you wonder if the questionable actions he took in the later games had any justification, and from a gameplay perspective you had a much more stripped down sneaking experience using bigger environments in a time before mega advanced technology was available. Well, apart from the Shagohod, but we'll come to that. Early in development, Kojima wanted the game to take place in a jungle environment with wide open spaces and uneven terrain, but the engine used for MGS2 couldn't handle it thanks to its collision engine, so an entirely new one was made. Originally, Metal Gear Solid 3 was going to be a PS3 game as well, but due to the long wait for the new consoles, it was released on the PS2 in November 2004. Metal Gear Solid 3 begins at the start of the Cold War, and Naked Snake, later Big Boss, is sent on a mission dubbed Virtuous Mission to rescue a Soviet rocket scientist called Sokolov that wants to defect to the USA. He's backed up by radio by paramedic Major Zero and his former mentor, the Boss. The mission goes alright until it doesn't. Snake is almost about to complete his mission when the Boss confronts him on a bridge. She reveals she's defecting to Russia with her old unit, and then some bloke called Colonel Volgin turns up who she's joined forces with. Snake tries to stop the Boss but gets his ass handed to him and thrown off a bridge. The Boss and her unit recapture Sokolov, and then Volgin launches one of the nukes the Boss gifted him as a defection present for shits and giggles. So yeah, goes tits right up. Snake gives himself some emergency medical treatment and it's gross, and then he is extracted. Forward to a week later and the USSR is blaming the US for the nuclear explosion. The US president tries to convince Russia they had nothing to do with it, but the Ruskies aren't having any of it, so they demand they take out the Boss and Volgin or face a full-on nuclear war. Snake is chosen for the mission, and the rest of his team from the Virtuous Mission are on board too, with the addition of Sigyn, the weapons expert, who I called once to get footage for this video. Snake makes his way back to the ruined facility where he rescued Sokolov to meet up with his contact Adam, but is instead met by NSA agent Eva, who I dislike massively. She just keeps getting her tits out to distract Snake and acts like a massive slut the whole game. Their meeting is interrupted by a young revolver Ocelot. Him and his unit ambush Snake and he wipes the floor with them.
You don't have what it takes to kill me. We'll see.
Operation Snake Eater is where MGS3 properly begins. The Virtuous Mission is like a tutorial, whereas Snake Eater is the meat and potatoes in my opinion. And Snake Eater is where you are introduced to most of the mechanics, so let's talk about gameplay for a bit. Just a little bit about Big Boss first. I think this game did the character of Big Boss a lot of service. He's much more human than Solid Snake, I feel. He shows fear, regret, sadness and love, which just makes him much easier to connect to. I do find it strange that David Hayter still voiced him. Since he is a different character, I would like to have had someone else play him, just to differentiate them a bit. I know Solid Snake is his clone and everything, but so was Liquid, and he had a different voice, and accents usually come from where you grew up. I imagine Snake's and Big Boss's upbringing were totally different. I don't want to take anything away from David Hayter though, he knocks it out of the park with this performance. In the original PS2 version, Kojima wanted the camera to function like it did in MGS 1 and 2, a top-down perspective with no 3D camera movement, and for MGS 3 it didn't work. I had to keep stopping and entering first person to look for enemies, which slowed the pace right down. It worked in MGS 2 and 1 because you had smaller environments and the Soliton radar to keep track of enemies. But in 3 you don't. You do get a motion detector that also shows the wildlife moving around. I genuinely couldn't finish the PS2 version when it came out because it annoyed me that much. But thankfully, the subsistence version came out 2 years later with a 3D camera, but that version was as rare as the Holy Grail in the UK. It wasn't until the HD version came out that I actually finished it. It's amazing what a decent camera can do to make a game 10 times better. You had all the moves from MGS2 at your disposal: hanging, getting on your tiptoes in first person, leaning, I won't bang on, but you also had the use of CQC, which was alright. This was one of those mechanics where the dreaded pressure sensitive controls came into play. For example, you held circle to grab an enemy, but if you held it down too hard you would immediately slit their throat. And as I said in the MGS2 video, they have a mind of their own. They were also used on guns for aiming. You held down square softly to aim and held it harder to ready a shot. But again, it's a dice roll whether it works or not, especially if you prepare a shot and then want to back out. There were cool uses for CQC, like using enemies as human shields, but it was awkward to control and it was much more effective and safe to just shoot an enemy in the face. The game also had a huge emphasis on survival, which was a mechanic that fared a lot better. Snake had a stamina meter this time round, which affected his aim and health regeneration. You had to keep it topped up by hunting and eating food. If food sat in the inventory too long, it would rot, so you couldn't stack up at the start of the game and let it sustain you from there. You could also get injuries such as broken bones, gunshot wounds, food poisoning, normal poisoning, burns, you name it. And these had to be treated in the survival viewer with supplies you find. It is in the pause menu, so it's quite funny when you do it in the middle of a boss fight. I just imagine Snake going, "Hold on a minute pal, let me just instantly fix my broken leg." And they're like, "Yeah, no worries mate." Another new mechanic was the camouflage system. The top right corner of the screen showed a percentage, and the closer to 100 the more invisible you were. Snake could change his outfit and face paint to blend in with the environment, but again this was accessed by the pause screen, so you may sort your outfit out, take a few steps and then need to pause the game and sort it out again. It's a good mechanic that adds an extra layer to the stealth, but it interrupts the gameplay quite a lot. It was a massively atmospheric game as well. The sounds of wildlife knocking about and the foliage rustling really drew me into the world, as well as having some gorgeous visuals that must have been straining the PS2 to its limits. The bosses in MGS3 were nice and varied, with some being better than others. There's a nice homage to the gun duel you have with Ocelot in MGS1, and then after that Snake jumps down a ravine only to encounter the first of the Cobra unit, the Pain. This is one of the more sillier bosses in the game. He commands a swarm of wasps that you can turn into a Tommy gun and other things. Yeah, I said it was silly. You had to take cover underwater to avoid them and rise up at the opportune moment to deal damage. You fight the Fear in a heavily forested area where he is almost invisible, shooting you with poison crossbow bolts. But I just used the fake death pill and then got up and battered him. But that's the cool thing with a lot of the boss fights, there's multiple ways to approach them. Like later on you fight the sniper legend, the End, which is probably the game's most iconic fight. You can have a tense snipe off with him, or you can sneak around him and shoot him in his wrinkly arse, or you can kill him earlier in the game by sniping him while he's sleeping in his wheelchair. Or you can save during his fight, forward the game clock a week, and then he just dies of old age, which is what I did because I'm lazy. The Fury is what I would say is the weakest boss fight. It's really easy, he just walks around talking bollocks and occasionally he sets fire to something whilst you just shoot him. There's the Sorrow as well, which is unique but really not that great. You just walk down a river and the souls of all the people you have killed try to kill you. But if you die, you just use the revival pill and that's it, boss done. Or you walk to the end and die, then use the revival pill. It's no Psycho Mantis, put it that way. After you have finished off the Cobra unit, only Volgin and the boss herself stand in your way, but I'll come to that later. So you sneak about the woods for a while, murking soldiers, the Cobra unit, and those fucking scientists who can make you and raise the alarm, leading me to get caught for the 1000th time. In the end I just went on a rampage on them, which calmed me down. Eventually you make your way to Volgin's research facility to take him out and rescue Sokolov again. This is where you have to take on the appearance of Major Raidenovich, who looks exactly like Raiden, and it turns out he's Volgin's gay lover. which I thought was a bit silly. Yeah, people dislike Raiden, but making him a gay sex slave feels a bit offensive. You meet Sokolov and he tells you to blow up his creation, the Shagohod, a nuclear-equipped super tank. Bit of foreshadowing there, did you spot it? But just before Snake can get Sokolov out, Volgin walks in and Snake gets caught because Volgin grabs him by the bollocks when he's disguised as Raidenovich and realises it's not him. Alright, this is where we see Snake get tortured and Volgin says you have a beautiful body like a newborn baby, which sent alarm bells ringing. Operation U-Tree should have looked into this bloke. Snake also loses his eye because Ocelot is being a showy twat. I actually felt really tense at the part where Volgin orders the boss to cut out your eyes. You can really see the fear on Snake's face, it's grim. This is also the first time the Philosopher's Legacy is mentioned. Volgin seems to think Snake is after it, but he has no idea what it is. After escaping captivity with Eva's help, Snake once again infiltrates Volgin's fortress to blow up the Shagohod. He plants the explosives only to be caught again, but this time before Snake fights Volgin, he explains what the Philosopher's Legacy is, since he reckons Snake is going to die anyway, cocky twat. After the end of the First World War, the US, Russia and China formed a group called the Philosophers, and pulled together loads of money and resources so they could remain top dogs on the world stage. How dare they? The UK was well hard at the time, mate, why weren't they involved? Anyway, at some point in the 30s, the last of the founding members died and the money was passed down to their successors. The successors suffered a lot of infighting, so the money was hidden in banks all over the world by Volgin's dad. Volgin himself eventually obtained it all to himself illegally. So after that, Snake dukes it out with Volgin, and a shotgun to the back of his head is a top tip here, by the way, and escapes the facility with Eva as it's blowing up, but Volgin gets in the Shagohod and chases Snake and Eva in what is a very long and drawn out chase section. Finally you blow up the Shagohod along with Volgin in a very mediocre boss fight where you have to wrestle with the stiff aiming controls as Eva swings a bike all over the place. And then, probably the worst section in MGS3 happens. Snake and Eva crash and Eva is badly injured. Snake then has to escort Eva to the evac point whilst he is in charge of her stamina and injuries. Her stamina drops really fast and she moves so slow, and if you move too far away from her she just stops following you. In areas crawling with enemies this is very frustrating because she will get caught. And then when you do get to the evac point, she springs to life again and runs towards the plane. Hang on you slag, what happened to you limping at death's door earlier? As Eva preps the plane, Snake has to face the boss herself in what is a cracking boss fight. It takes place in this gorgeous flower bed and all the petals throw up in the air as you and the boss move through them. It's cracking. The theme song also pipes up as you get near the end of it. It's just a great way to end the game. You really do have to use everything you've learned as well. You can counter the boss's CQC in this fight, which is something I wish you could do on other enemies. After taking her down, she gives Snake the Philosopher's Legacy, and then you as the player has to press the trigger one last time to finish her off. As Snake and Eva fly away, Ocelot turns up for one last scrap. Well, a game of Russian roulette really. You have to pick between two revolvers with only one bullet in. Afterwards it's revealed the bullet in the revolver is a blank anyway, and then Ocelot just throws himself out the door at high speed and somehow survives. Finally, Snake gets some time to rest with Eva, and he finally shags her, and I think me and many other people were like, Snake, what you doing, man? She's clearly up to something. Turns out she is, and get ready for this because it's a big one. Eva leaves Snake a recording informing him that she was a Chinese spy sent to nick the Philosopher's Legacy and kill Snake, but she couldn't do it because she loves him. Gay. This is the bit that confuses me though. It makes it seem like Eva has nicked the legacy off Snake, but then you see him get it out of his pocket. Theory seem to think that when Eva is taken to one side by the boss before Snake fights Volgin, she gives her a fake copy but gives Snake the real one. So the only reason Eva is there at the end is to kill Snake, which makes sense to me, but it is a big oversight in the story. It also turns out that the boss's defection was set up by the US. She was ordered to defect so she could infiltrate Volgin's group and find information about and obtain the legacy. But because Volgin launched that nuke at the start of the game, she had to be branded befriended a traitor, sacrifice her reputation, and being ordered to die by Snake's hand, thus proving America's innocence. This clearly angers Snake. When he is given his rewards at the end of his mission, a medal and the title of Big Boss, he just has a look of disgust on his face. Clearly angry at the country he has dedicated his life towards, which explains the actions he takes in later games. Finally, you see Big Boss go to his mentor's grave and lay her gun to rest as a solitary tear streams down his face. It's pretty gut-wrenching. But then, after the end credits, you hear a phone conversation between Ocelot and the KGB, conspiring with them. But then, he rings someone else, tells them that the legacy Eva got was a fake, and that half of the legacy was in America's hands, with the rest being with the KGB. He also drops the bomb that no one knew he was Adam, who Snake was meant to contact at the start of the game all along. He finishes the conversation by saying he is always at the CIA's disposal, revealing he has been triple-crossing the whole time. Jesus. After its release, Metal Gear Solid 3 won numerous awards and is considered one of the best PS2 games ever made, which I totally agree with the subsistence version. Its gameplay was varied, letting the player use their initiative. It had a great story and performances, as well as being stunning to look at and listen to. Kojima stated after finishing Metal Gear Solid 2 that he was done making the games and wanted to hand over the director role to someone else, but good thing he didn't, because 3 was awesome. And he wanted to end the series after 3, but you don't make an ending with so many questions left unanswered like Metal Gear Solid 2, and then make a prequel like 3 and not be expected to finish the story off. So finally, we get to the end of the Metal Gear Solid story with Metal Gear Solid 4 next time.
They'll tell you what they know, but they won't.